Hi, I'm Jennifer Monet Cowley. I am an artist, a curator, designer, and an educator, and also a moderator. It's a new little thing to add to my repertoire. Also a custom framer. And as far as my art practice go, I've been an artist all my life. As far as I can remember, my grandmother would keep my little cards that I would make. Well, I would make her a Valentine's Day card or even a Mother's Day card from my mother, my grandmother, my great grandmother. They would keep all of these things. So when my grandmother passed back in '98, she still had my things framed in her bedroom. So that was a really good urge and push to keep me going as far as to continue to create. And as far as my creative space, my husband and I have been married for 32 years. And when we first got married, it was a non-negotiable. I've always had to have somewhere to create, even if it was a corner in the living room or the dining room or just a whole room. We recently just moved from one house into another. So my space is just a little bit smaller than the previous space, but I'm very happy with it because it's kind of in a loft area of the house and it's the only thing that's up there. So I have just solitude and just peace, and it overlooks the backyard, which is beautiful, and there's nothing else up there, and I can just do my thing and just zone out, and sometimes just be, even if I'm just not up there creating. But I'm always creating. Even if I'm not physically creating, I'm still creating in my mind because everything is inspiration to me, even if it's just listening to music or reading or just daydreaming or watching a movie or talking to people, going to visit other artists and just talking, doing, just any and everything inspires me. I'm originally from Oak Cliff, born and raised, original Dallas site, and I love Oak Cliff because to me, Oak Cliff is one of the most beautiful parts of the city with the mature trees, the older homes, and just the camaraderie between the neighbors and just the people, and it just has so much flavor that some other parts of the city just lack. Just lack it. I'm just itching to get back to Oak Cliff to live and to reside and just do things and some of everything here. I attended Adele Turner elementary school, and then also Atwell Junior High School, with Carter being my home school, but I went to Skyline and graduated from Skyline High School. And that's where my art just really flourished, because when I entered Skyline, I was there for fashion design. And as the years progressed, I changed my focus to commercial art. But when I went to school, because I started out at UTA, and my parents were they're from the generation like, you have to get to something where you can make some money at. So it was drilled into me and my sister and my brother, you either need to be a doctor or a lawyer or something like that. So I went to UTA thinking I was going to be a dentist. I am not into science at all. So when I got there, it was not for me. So I quickly changed my major to architecture. I was in architecture school for 3.5 years. And then I loved architecture, but when I really thought about it, I'm like, it was too rigid and too, and I'm very detail orientated, but it was too much. So I changed my major to art, something that I love, something that I had a passion for. And my parents said, what are you going to do with an art degree? And I said, I am going to live. I'm not going to just exist. So from that point on, I just followed my heart and followed my passion and just really immersed myself in art the best way I could, and surrounding myself with other creatives. And it was different because one of the first artists that I met was Frank Frazier, who actually took me under his wing and mentored me. And I traveled the United States with him as his road manager until he found out that I was an artist, and then I started traveling with him as an artist until I became pregnant with my son, because I did get married pretty early. And so all that traveling ceased. Sometimes when being a mother and being an artist, sometimes the two don't mesh because you have a tendency to put your art and yourself on the back burner. And that's kind of what happened with me with my art over the years. I put it on the back burner until all the kids were kind of out of the house or in college. Like my youngest daughter, for instance, she just turned 20. And when she went off to school, my husband was like, babe, come on home so you can just do you. So I completely took him up on his offer, and my career in art just kind of skyrocketed very quickly, unexpectedly, but it did. I was the gallery manager at Stephanie's Collection, which was located on Greenville Avenue. And Frank Frazier just happened to walk in one day and asked me to lift some big heavy something. And I'm just kind of looking at him like, why? You know, because I didn't understand the why. Why do you want me to lift this? I don't even know you. So I lifted, you know, because I'm like, you're not going to challenge me, and me, you know, me being me, I accept the challenge, you know, if it makes, even if sometimes if it doesn't make sense. But I accepted the challenge and lifted it. And then there was another artist with him by the name of Randy Leger. And he said, oh, she'll be good. And I'm just kind of thinking, oh gosh, what did I do, you know? And then he invited me to come to his house and meet his wife, Judy. And Judy, if y'all do not know Judy, she's one of the coolest people in the world. She rides a motorcycle. Yeah, she rides a motorcycle. She rode her motorcycle to this opening here. Yeah, but she's one of the coolest people that I've ever met. And he said, I want you to come over and meet my wife, Judy, and I want to talk to you about coming on the road with me. And so I traveled with Frank for about a year. I traveled to New York, California, Cleveland, Cincinnati, Delaware, all over, selling his artwork. And then when he got wind that I was an artist, I started traveling with him as an artist. And he opened up a whole lot of doors for me, and just meeting different people and just kind of showing me the ropes. And on one trip, when I was coming back from a trip from New York with him, I was invited to come back to do a women's show at Sabaku Gallery in New York. And on that trip is when I found out that I was pregnant with my first child. Because my clothes were fitting a little different, a little tighter, and my appetite was a little funny. So all that traveling ceased. Before I got pregnant, I took over some classes for another artist by the name of Samuel Asumba. He was a sculptor, and he wasn't able to fulfill his commitment to teach these classes at the African American Museum, and also like Rhodes Terrace and St. Philip's Episcopal School and St. Anthony's. So I ended up taking over the classes. So that was my segue into teaching art to children. So after several years of just being a stay-at-home mom, my son was 4 at the time, and I felt that he needed some social interaction because his only interaction was with me, because I was at home with him every day, and my 2-year-old daughter. So I walked into the Kester School just to do a little research and find a school for him, a little preschool. And when they found out that I was an artist, they offered me a job there. And they said, your kids can go here for free. So if you teach here, we'll pay you a little something. And I was like, okay. So I said, well, I have a 2-year-old at home. Oh, she can go to our Mother's Day program. We'll pay for her too. And I'm like, okay. So I taught there for 2 years, and I became pregnant again in 2002 with Willow been born in 2003. So after that, I stayed at home a little bit longer, just came back home to be with my kids. And I was offered a job at the West Dallas Community School. And then I taught there, I want to say maybe 2005 to 2006. I taught there for 1 year. But it shows you how sometimes the universe and how God works, because my son's preschool teacher contacted me and said, the head of the lower school wants to come by and look at your art because we're having a program at the school. We would love for you to be a part of it, because at this time she was teaching over at Canterbury. So Wilton Banks came over to my house to look at my art to put in this program. And when he found out that I taught school before, he said, I don't know when, he said, but I'm gonna hire you to come teach and be an art teacher at my school. And a year later, like in April of the following year, he called me and I taught there for 7 years. And it's funny how things work, because every single teaching position that I've had, including when I was teaching in the various summer programs 20 years prior, and before Seth was born and after he was born, because I would carry my kids everywhere and I would tell them, just act like my kids are not here. And I would tell the employers, I'm like, my kids come first, which means I can only be here between this time and this time. I have to leave by this time. I can't be here before this time. And every single one of them accommodated me. Every single, I've been blessed like that, because some people, they won't do it for them. But I was able to drop my kids off and pick them up. And if someone was sick, it was not a problem. They just trusted me to do my job. I wrote my own curriculum, raised a lot of money for the school through art programs that I started at Kessler School and at Canterbury, to raise money for my classroom, where the kids were not just using crayons and markers, they were using acrylics and painting on canvases, bought them a professional easel, we were printmaking, we were doing some of everything. And I sold the artwork back to the parents. Where we were having auctions and all the things. So that was a really, really good experience. So now when I see some of my students that I taught when they were in preschool, they're graduating from high school, it's like, oh my gosh, I feel so old, but I know that they made footprints on my heart just like I made footprints on their hearts. But with Frank Frazier, he so helpful to so many artists, just a great person, but you know, he is a little rough around the edges, but he has a really good heart. And with Frank, with me growing up in Oak Cliff and with me being friends with Othello and friends with Frank, several years back, Frank invited me to be a part of a project in honor of Othello Beck Jr. This sculpture that's in the park now came to me in a dream. And all my things were packed up. So I got up in the middle of the night, because sometimes when you dream about things, you lose it and forget when you wake up. So I didn't want to lose it. So I'm like, okay, this is important. I have to get up. So I had to wheel myself up, because I did not want to get up, because I was tired because we had just moved. And I found an envelope, and I just did a really rough sketch on the back of an envelope, and I presented that to the city the next day. And the driving force behind the sculpture for me was a quote that Othello Beck made back in the early 70s, when he said, I strive to humanize African Americans in my artwork, because African Americans are always dehumanized. So the sculpture is actually called The Humanization instead of dehumanization, because we want to humanize African American families, because it was important for me to present a family and not just one male or one female, although African American males tend to be targeted more. But I want to highlight that Black fathers are in families, because there's a narrative that's out there that Black fathers are not present, which is not true. That's not my reality, and it's not the reality of a lot of people that I know. So I want to make sure that the Black father was present. He was reading to his child, playing with his child. Black mother was present, and she's engaged with her daughter and doing her hair, and they're just having family time, and they're just minding their business, sitting under a tree. So I wanted to make sure that these people, Black people, were humanized in this sculpture, and to honor what Othello said back in the 70s, because that is something that he strived to do in his artwork at the urging of his wife, May Beck. So with my curatorial work, because I kind of backed into curation, because when I graduated from University of Texas at Dallas back in '93, I naively went to the African American Museum thinking I was going to be a curator. Had no idea what a curator was. I just knew it had something to do with art, and that was good enough for me. Did not do any research. So when I went in to interview, they just kind of looked at me like, are you for real? So I kind of left there with my tail between my legs. And then although I started teaching there years later by taking over some classes for another artist, I had a very full circle moment in 2018 when I received a text message from Dr. Harry Robinson asking me if I was interested in part-time work at the African American Museum. My response was, it depends. And he said, curator, coordinator over the summer program. And I said, okay, I'm intrigued, tell me more. So I became the curator at the African American Museum in September of 2018. I had no idea what I was doing. I had to figure it out. The first show that I curated there was called #US2Phenomenal because I was charged to curate just a women's show. But I did not, me being me and me just being hyper creative, I'm like, I'm just not gonna do a retrospect with just any and everything. I'm like, we're gonna have a theme and all the things. So my husband saw a blurb that Beth Midler said about Black women, or just women in particular, being the niggers of the world. And so they jumped on her back on that. So a Black journalist said, ain't I a woman? After Sigourney Truth. And I said, that's it. So the show was called #US2Phenomenal because we didn't want to focus on the trauma and the drama and all of that. So that show featured 20 African-American artists, including myself, because it also gave me a platform to show my work, because I know what it feels like to be on the outside looking in. To curate different things, as I've curated several groundbreaking shows at the African American Museum, like #US2, Tears, Weaponize, Evaluate, Reconcile, ? Claiming Space, Me, You, Us. Also, I curated a show over at 500X. And then when I was asked to do this Juneteenth thing, they were asking around for a curator, and my name kept coming up because most people only know me as an artist. Some people only know me as a curator, but I'm both. And when Damani Daniels called me, he said, your name kept coming up. He said, I had no idea that you were a curator. I'm like, yeah, I am. So when this show came together, it's called Griot, Telling Our Story. It's a Juneteenth story. And typically I do not do Black history stuff or Juneteenth because I'm Black 365 days a year. Do not call me just during February or for Juneteenth. Call me other times too. So when he called, he said this has to be a quick turnaround. So it was like a 2.5 week turnaround. So I had to come up with the artists, because I'm all about giving other artists opportunity, because again, I know what it feels like being on the outside looking in, and that whole thing about exposure. But I want to make sure I give artists the right type of exposure and not just showing their work for free unless it's at a museum. But not some little pop-up somewhere or displaying someone's wall. We've heard that enough. So with this particular show, in Deep Ellum, I insisted that all of the artists get a stipend. I also insisted that the widows of the artists, 2 of the artists who are deceased, I insisted that their spouses be paid as well, because they are the executors of their estate, because we are not doing things for free. But with curatorial things, you have to make sense. The story has to make sense. It's not just haphazardly hanging things just any which way. You want it to tell a story. You want a narrative behind it. And that's how I curate and how I create a story that I'm trying to convey. I met Daisha Ward when I became the curator at the African American Museum. And she got wind of me from Evita Tizano, who is a longtime friend. And when she found out that the African American Museum had a Black female curator, she said, I have to meet her. So I was in the process of curating #US2Phenomenal, and Daisha came in bearing gifts. She brought me a t-shirt saying support Black artists, Black female artists. So, and she said, I had to meet you. So after that, we just became fast friends. And when I found out that she had an art company where she just brought exposure to Black artists and bringing Black people into just white spaces to expose them to the arts and all of that. I wanted to know more. And for years, I had been looking for an art agent because I can't do this by myself. And I've attempted and I've tried, and it's just not me. So I need help. And when I need help, I recognize when I need help. So when I found out exactly what she did, I signed with Black Sheep Art Culture back in 21, in like January of 2021. Why am I saying 1921? But 2021. And I just felt there would be a good partnership. And I'm just honored to be one of the artists on her roster. Honored to be part of her journey as a Black female-owned gallerist. And just the doors that she is continuing to open for me. As a direct result, she called me like in September of last year when I was trying to organize a fundraiser for the artists who were displaced from the floods that happened in Deep Ellum. She called me because I had some really tough conversations with some artists, and she said, I have some really good news. She said, we got accepted to Art Basel. We're going to Art Basel. And I was just in tears because it was on my bucket list to go, but I thought I was just going to be going as a patron, not as an artist, but to actually go to Art Basel and actually sell and to really kill it. It was amazing. It was an amazing experience. I was exhausted, but it was an amazing experience. And in the midst of that call, like a week later, I received a call from Frankie Garcia to do a commission piece for Broadway Dallas. And another one, I was like, what? Me? I couldn't believe it. It was these two phenomenal things happening at the same time. And I just feel completely honored and completely blessed to live the life that I'm living and to experience the good things that I've been experiencing, because I do feel that what's reciprocated will be reciprocated on you. And karma is real. It is very real. So one thing I do try to do is just be a good person. I just try. I don't always get it right, but I do try. And I try to pay it forward, but I'm just thankful. In September of October of 2022, I received a phone call from Frankie Garcia, who I'd met through Daisha Board of Daisha Board Gallery, to do a painting for the music hall for Broadway Dallas on redlining. After he saw my painting that was in my solo show that he installed, called The Story of White People, WIPIPO. I'm white, okay. That's what the painting was called. So after he saw that painting, he thought that I would be a great fit to do this particular piece on redlining. And when I received the call, I had just gotten a call from Daisha about going to Miami for Art Basel. So I was trying to figure out, how am I going to do both of these? So Frankie ended up building this huge canvas for me, and I ended up priming it before I left for Miami, but I didn't get a chance to start on it, and I believe the painting was due like December 16th. So when I returned from Miami, I came home sick, took 2 days to get my bearings together, and then I completed this big giant painting within a week. And I'm very proud of it. It's called Grandiose, a pleasant amount of delusion. Sometimes I forget the title of my painting because I have so many, but it's called Grandiose, a pleasant amount of delusion. And the title came from The Accommodation, the book by Jim Schultz that was went out of print for a very long time, and then Deep Vellum, the publishing company in Deep Ellum, republished it, and I received a copy of it. So I started doing research on redlining because I research a lot of the paintings that I do. So I know what I'm talking about because people will call you out on things. So when they mentioned something about Grandiose, and I paused because I was listening to the book, and I was like, oh my goodness. I'm like, that's the title. And then I added a pleasant amount of delusion, because it is delusional to think that you are superior over someone else. So with the concept of redlining in creating this painting, I utilized a vintage redlining map, probably from the 1950s, something that was from Jim Crow, and used it as inspiration, kind of like a guide, but not exactly, because it looks completely different than what I created. But use it kind of as a guide, where I use thick, heavy red lines to two different shades of red lines to show the stark contrast between white neighborhoods and black neighborhoods. And I use paint samples, like paint chip cards from like Home Depot and Lowe's, where when I was creating the Story of White People piece, and I decided to use these sample cards as a tool to create this collage piece, and I was fanning them out, and it's like, there's a huge section of white paints at Home Depot and Lowe's, like hundreds of white paints. So when I fanned them out, they were very subtle in the whiteness, and the titles were very interesting. So like Mayfair White, Pure White, Snow White, Angel White, all these names for white paints. There was also a lavender white, and if you look at Mayfair White, it's green. And I was thinking, because this was like in 2021 or so, and I'm looking, and I started thinking about racism and the state of race relations here in the United States. And I said, okay, white people, y'all aren't as white as what you think you are, because the proof is in the pudding right here, because you have all of these different shades of white, which means that you got some black or some other in you somewhere, because when you look at white people or even black people, we're all different shades. So it's the same thing with black people, because with black people, if you have one drop of black blood in you, you're considered black, even if you don't look it. So in the painting, I depicted the one black drop for the one drop rule. So if you have one drop, you're considered black, even if you don't look it. So even on the painting, I use these paint sample cards to show the varying shades of white, and also put one black one in there, because sometimes you had maybe one black family living in an all-white neighborhood. They may not have necessarily been wanted there, but they lived there, just like you had maybe one white family or two white families that lived in an all-black neighborhood. So I depicted that as well, to try to be as honest in my depiction and as truthful in my depiction, and also as historic in my depiction for the painting. So I just honored that Frankie called me to be a part of this, because when I received the call to do this for Broadway Dallas, I'm like, oh my gosh, it was another aha moment. I've had quite a few aha moments, but that was just another one, back to back, from Art Basel and solo show at Deja Board Gallery, and then to have a painting that the music hall that Broadway Dallas paid for, that it was not donated. It was everything. It was, I still can't believe it. I still can't believe it.